Most people will work for 40 years and still die without financial freedom. That is not a prediction. That is a pattern. It repeats across generations, across continents, across every economic era in modern history. The names change, the technology changes, but the outcome remains the same for the vast majority of people who trade their time for a paycheck and call it a life. You were handed a script the moment you were born. Study hard, get a good job, work until 65, retire with whatever's left. And most people follow that script without ever once asking whether it leads somewhere they actually want to go. This video is about the man who looked at that script and quietly, patiently, and with extraordinary discipline refused to follow it. Warren Buffett did not become one of the wealthiest human beings in recorded history by working harder than everyone else. He did not invent something revolutionary. He did not build a technology that changed the world overnight. He did not take extreme risks or gamble his way to fortune. He did something far more difficult. He thought differently. He saw time differently. He saw money differently. And he saw himself differently. By the time you finish this video, you will understand not just what he did, but why most people are psychologically incapable of doing the same thing. And more importantly, what it would take for you to begin. Let us start with an honest question. Why do most people stay financially stuck? It is not because they are lazy. Most people work extremely hard. It is not because they are unintelligent. There are brilliant, hard-working people living paycheck to paycheck in every city on earth. The real reason is far more uncomfortable. Most people are financially stuck because of the way they think about money, and that thinking was shaped before they ever had any. From childhood, most of us were taught that money is something you earn by working. You give your time, and in exchange, you receive currency. That feels fair. It feels moral. It feels like the natural order of things. But here is what nobody tells you. That model, trading time for money, has a ceiling. There are only so many hours in a day. No matter how talented you are, no matter how much your hourly rate increases, there comes a hard limit to what you can earn when your income depends entirely on your presence. And yet the world is full of people defending that ceiling with their entire identity. They say things like, I just need a raise. I just need a better job. I just need to work overtime for a few more years. And so they run faster inside the same machine, mistaking speed for direction. Then there is the trap within the trap. Lifestyle inflation. When income rises, spending rises with it. Bigger apartment, newer car, better vacations. Every upgrade feels earned. Every luxury feels like progress. But the gap between what you earn and what you keep, the gap that actually builds wealth, quietly disappears. The psychological pull of lifestyle inflation is almost impossible to resist without deliberate intention because spending feels good. Accumulation feels good. Social status, in the short term, comes from visible consumption, and the human brain is wired for short-term rewards. This is where most financial stories end, not in disaster, just in stillness. A comfortable life, a busy life, a life that looks successful from the outside and feels hollow at 3 a.m. when the math refuses to lie. There is also the emotional component of money that almost no one talks about honestly. People do not make financial decisions with spreadsheets. They make them with fear, with hope, with pride, with shame. They buy stocks when they feel optimistic and panic sell when the market drops. They avoid investing because uncertainty feels like danger. They make major financial decisions based on what their neighbors are doing, what their parents did, what society tells them a successful person looks like. The market has crashed and recovered every single decade of modern financial history. And yet every single time, millions of people sell at the bottom, locking in permanent losses because they followed their emotions instead of their understanding. Buffett has studied this human tendency his entire life. He has written about it, spoken about it, and built his entire investment philosophy around one core recognition. The greatest advantage in investing is not intelligence. It is temperament. Now let us talk about what he actually did differently. Buffett began investing as a child, not metaphorically, literally. He was buying stocks and running small business ventures before most children had finished primary school. By the time he was 13, he had filed his first tax return. By his mid-20s, he was already operating an investment partnership that was quietly outperforming every major fund on Wall Street. But the mechanism was not secret. The mechanism was almost aggressively simple. He looked for businesses that he could understand, businesses with a durable competitive advantage, something that protected them from competition year after year like a moat around a castle. He looked for honest, capable management. And he looked for a price that was less than what the business was genuinely worth. Then he waited, not for days, not for months, sometimes for decades. This is the part that most people intellectually understand and emotionally cannot execute. Waiting in a world that rewards constant motion feels like failure. Holding a stock while everyone around you is trading feels like passivity. Watching the market gyrate and doing nothing requires a level of psychological discipline that runs directly against every instinct our culture has trained into us. But the math of patience is not subtle. It is staggering, compounding. The process by which returns generate their own returns over time is one of the most powerful forces in the financial universe. It does not reward those who are smartest. It does not reward those who are most active. It rewards those who are most patient and most consistent. A person who begins investing modestly in their 20s and never stops through recessions, through market crashes, through years when the returns feel invisible, will often end up with more wealth than someone who starts later with far more money and far more sophistication. Time is the one resource that cannot be bought back. And Buffett understood this when he was still a teenager. Now, let us go deeper into the specific lessons that define his approach. The first lesson is this: the business you understand is worth more than the business everyone else is excited about. There is a permanent seduction in novelty. Every era has its new industry, its exciting frontier, its wave of transformation that promises to reshape the world. And every era also produces enormous losses for people who invested in companies they did not understand simply because the story was compelling. Buffett stayed inside. His circle of competence. He focused on businesses he could genuinely understand, their economics, their competitive position, their long-term prospects. He passed on countless opportunities that seemed exciting because he knew that excitement is not a substitute for comprehension. This is not timidity. This is precision. A surgeon who only operates within their expertise does not become less successful by refusing to attempt surgeries outside it. They become more successful because they eliminate the errors that come from overconfidence. In your own financial life, this lesson translates directly. Before you invest in anything, a stock, a business, a piece of real estate, ask yourself honestly, do I understand how this creates value? Do I understand its risks? If the honest answer is no, then the appropriate response is not to research more aggressively. It is to wait until you find something you genuinely understand. The second lesson: the price you pay determines the return you receive. This sounds obvious. It is not practiced. Every investor knows at an intellectual level that buying something at a high price reduces future returns. But in practice, most investors buy at high prices because high prices are associated with excitement, momentum, and social validation. Everyone is talking about a company, the stock is rising, missing out feels worse than the risk of overpaying. Buffett developed an almost clinical detachment from price momentum. He was not interested in what a stock had done recently. He was interested in what the underlying business was worth, its intrinsic value, and whether the market was offering him a meaningful discount to that value. He observed that the stock market is a mechanism that transfers wealth from the impatient to the patient. When panic selling drives a quality company's price far below its true worth, that is not a C. Rises for the informed investor, that is an opportunity. The ability to see a falling price as a potential gift rather than a warning sign requires not just knowledge, but psychological preparation. You have to have done the work in advance. You have to trust your own analysis. You have to be emotionally prepared for the discomfort of moving against the crowd. Most people never get there, not because they lack the ability, but because they never committed to building that level of understanding in the first place. The third lesson: inaction is often the most powerful action available to you. We live in an era of constant financial noise. Analysts predicting market directions, headlines announcing crisis or opportunity every other week. Social platforms filled with people sharing what they just bought, what they just sold, what you should consider before the end of the quarter. The implicit message in all of this noise is that you should be doing something, adjusting, reacting, optimizing. Buffett's approach is the philosophical opposite. He has spoken about the concept of a punch card with a limited number of holes, the idea that if you could only make a small number of investment decisions in your entire lifetime, you would think with extraordinary care before each one. You would wait for the best opportunities. You would not waste your few punches on mediocre ideas. The average investor makes dozens of transactions every year. The friction from taxes, fees, and poor timing erodes returns in ways that rarely appear in the excitement of the decision. The investor who makes 5 deeply considered decisions over a decade and holds through the volatility often outperforms the investor who is always doing something, always adjusting, always reacting. Stillness is not passivity. Stillness, in the right context, is strategy. The fourth lesson is perhaps the most honestly transformative. Separate your self-worth from your net worth. One of the most insidious features of modern financial culture is that it has fused identity with economic status. What you drive, where you live, what you wear. These have become signals of personal worth, not merely personal preference. This fusion creates a compulsion that is almost impossible to overcome through willpower alone. The need to appear successful becomes more powerful than the need to actually build something durable. Buffett lived for decades in the same house he bought as a young man in Omaha, Nebraska. He drove modest cars. He ate simple food, not because he was performing frugality, but because his identity was never tied to those external markers. He found his satisfaction in the intellectual challenge of the work itself, not in its visible rewards. This is not a call to asceticism, it is a call to awareness. If you can identify the places in your own financial life where you are spending money to manage how others perceive you, rather than to create genuine joy or security, you have found a lever. Releasing that lever does not just free up capital, it frees up something more valuable, the psychological space to think clearly about your actual future. The fifth lesson brings everything together. Think in decades, not in quarters. The employee mindset, the 9 to 5 trap, is fundamentally a short-time horizon mindset. You work this week to get paid this month. You save what you can and spend the rest. The future is acknowledged but experienced as abstract, as distant, as something to deal with later. The wealth builder's mindset is organized around a completely different timeline. Every financial decision is evaluated not just for its immediate effect, but for what it compounds into over 10, 20, 30 years. An extra $100 invested at 30 is not just $100. Through the mechanism of compounding over a sufficient time horizon, it becomes many multiples of that. The person who understands this, who genuinely feels it, not just understands it intellectually, makes different decisions every single day. They decline the unnecessary purchase, not because they are cheap, but because they can see its future value disappearing. They hold their investments through market turbulence, not because they are fearless, but because they have grounded their decisions in understanding rather than emotion. They think about the next decade the way most people think about the next paycheck. Now let us talk about what happens when you actually apply these principles consistently. In the first year, almost nothing visible happens. You invest, you hold, the market moves, you feel uncertain. The people around you may appear to be making faster gains on more exciting investments. The discipline required to stay the course feels unnecessary, even foolish. In the third year, small patterns begin to emerge. Your compounding is still modest, but the gap between where you are and where you would have been without these decisions begins to widen. You start to feel less reactive. The noise of the market loses some of its power over you. By the fifth year, the transformation is becoming real. Not just financially, psychologically. You have held through at least one period of market fear. You have resisted at least one wave of speculative excitement. You have proven to yourself through action that you are capable of the discipline you once only aspired to. This is not nothing. This is everything. Because the greatest barrier between most people and financial independence is not information. It is trust, specifically self-trust. The belief that you have the capacity to remain rational when the world around you is emotional. The belief that the principles you have chosen are sound enough to hold when holding feels difficult. By year 10, if you have been consistent, the compound math begins to feel almost surreal. Returns are generating their own returns. The initial capital you deployed years ago is doing work in the background of your life, quietly, without requiring your constant presence or attention. This is the escape from the 9 to 5 trap, not through a sudden windfall, not through a lucky bet, through the slow, deliberate, unglamorous accumulation of ownership in productive things, held patiently through all conditions for long enough that time itself becomes your greatest asset. And here is what changes when you reach this point. You wake up on a Tuesday morning and your relationship with time has shifted. The hours of your day are not mortgaged to someone else's priorities. The anxiety that runs beneath the surface of a life lived paycheck to paycheck That low-grade financial fear that never quite goes away has been replaced by something quieter and more solid. Not extravagance, not wealth that announces itself, but the kind of wealth that means you can make the most important decisions in your life, where to live, how to spend your time, what work you take on. Set on what genuinely matters to you rather than what you can financially afford. That is what financial independence actually is, not a number, a relationship with choice. There is one final thing worth saying before this ends. Everything in this video is available to you right now, not tomorrow, not when your income is higher or your circumstances are better arranged. Right now. You do not need to be wealthy to begin thinking like someone building wealth. You do not need a large portfolio to begin practicing patience, to begin studying businesses, to begin separating businesses, to begin separating your identity from your consumption. The gap between the person you are financially today and the person you could become in 10 years is not determined by your starting capital. It is determined by the quality and consistency of your thinking. Most people will watch a video like this, feel something genuine for a moment, and then return to the same decisions they made yesterday. Not because they are weak, but because transformation requires more than inspiration. It requires the kind of slow, committed work that does not feel dramatic in the doing. You have to choose to think in decades when the world is thinking in days. You have to choose to hold when every instinct says to move. You have to choose to understand before you act, even when acting feels urgent. Buffett did not escape the 9-to-5 trap by accident. He escaped it by building from a very young age a way of seeing the world that made patience feel natural, that made discipline feel like freedom, and that made the long game feel more real and more alive than the noise of any given moment. That way of seeing is available to you, not as a quick fix, not as a shortcut, but as a genuine, durable, life-altering shift in how you relate to money, to time, and to your own potential. The question is not whether you understand this. The question is whether you are willing to live it. If this perspective moves something in you, subscribe, not for entertainment, but for the ongoing work of becoming someone who sees the well or differently. This channel is for people who are serious. And if you made it to the end of this video, you already know which category you belong to.